consent. Yan. Okay, so yun. So good evening to everyone. So actually, we're happy na aside from the three of us, there are some people who joined. So I know some of you. So thank you for joining us. So okay, let's start lang. So we're recording. So to let everyone know, so again, we're recording and then we will be uploading the video to Photography Chismis for people to be able to view it, yung mga hindi nakasama. And then aside from that, yun then it's our way also to promote the discourse. So ideally people can join in, pero since everyone not everyone is free tonight, tapos pwede naman silang pwede nilang panoorin doon sa Photography Chismis. And then aside from that, yun. So yun, sige, let's start na. So ito lang, I'll just give an intro. So why are we here? So in the last 5 years, there has been a growing presence of photography in spaces that are usually associated with art making. So most noticeable, of course, would be the 2018 art fair. So Sir AG wrote something about it. So I think it's one of the more credible writings about the ArtFairPH 2018. So Sir AG is a writer. He's a critic. He's a teacher. So he's also a practitioner. So he wrote something about the ArtFairPH 2018. You can look it up if you want. So yun. So that based on what is written. So in 2018, ArtFairPH dedicated an entire tour about photography as art. And while the documented presence of the medium in Philippine galleries goes as far back as 1967, which is contemporary. So that's the exhibit of the 5 photographers sa Gallery Indigo, yung kay Ben Cab. Much of the attempt to legitimize photography as art has been cursory or short-lived. Meaning, nababanggit siya once in a while, pero ang nangyayari is, although there's an effort, hindi siya naglalast. So medyo cursory siya. While several texts and experts could be cited to support the idea of creative artistic expression being gestured individually or nationally in the past, acceptance of photography as a legitimate art in the Philippine context is still elusive. I think even my students would argue, some of them would argue that photography is not art, and it's interesting. So anyway, so tonight we tried to talk about the National Artist Award as a possible site of legitimization. So that's the reason why we chose the National Artist Award, because it's related to the legitimization of the concept of photography as art in the Philippines. So that's basically it. And we are also going to take into account the political, ideological, and academic particularities embedded in the discourse. So again, thank you for joining us tonight for episode 1 of the Marites Talks Kwentuhan session about Philippine photography. So to start with, so yan. So we have AG De Mesa and we have Stephanie Frondoso for our discussants. Pero again, this is a kwentuhan session, so it's more informal. For those who are participating in the kwentuhan, you can put your comments or questions in the chat box. So para we can also have a lively discussion. So this is not a lecture class, so medyo free for all, pero we're going to try to put some order para maganda yung discussion, tsaka may structure siya. So the first question, Steph and Sir AG, Miss Steph and Sir AG. So in the first place, is photography art in the Philippine context? So yun, siguro, ladies first. So si Steph.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Ladies first.
You started the question with, is photography even art? And in the Philippine context. So I would, my stand is yes. And that is because the act of making a photograph is a creative process. This is what separates humans from animals. And I think that's the definition of art. So it doesn't matter where in the world this is practiced, it's art. So when you say considered art in the Philippines, the real question there is by whom? In terms of the gallery system and maybe the museums, which is where art is traded most of the time, I would also say yes, because I've been attending many gallery shows this month, last month. All of them have photography exhibits. The show that opened today at Silver Lens is a cyanotype show by Corinne de San Jose. Ongoing at Gravity Art Space is also one of the photographers who were at Photomoto. And also a few of our photographers is in the massive Southeast Asian photography survey in Singapore. They included Filipino artists like Wawi Navarroza, Poklong Anading, and online Kiri Dalena and VJ Villafranca. Last month also, Art Informal Gallery had the work of Reina Abella. And before that, photo-based art of Zian Cabangis. So there is a lot of photography in the galleries. And that's why my stand would be yes. How about AG?
Si AG naman.
No, para maiba lang. Para maiba.
Ano to serious kasi?
No, hindi naman, not the seriousness, of course.
Okay.
I jest. I jest. But
Yeah.
it's a question that has been thrown even before I was into this thing. It's this question certainly students throw all the time. And my answer has evolved through the years. Through the years before, I was a staunch defender of it, of course. And there's also numerous times na parang, syempre, somebody with a dissenting opinion, you have to hear it out. Tignan natin, ano ang sasabihin. For my case, I'm now currently where I am in my life. I'm at a point where I don't care. Whether if it's art or not, I'm just concerned with the output, with the product. Whether it's generated, whether it's, as long as it's visual, probably made with a camera. For institution purposes, of course it is, right? For somebody, in when you're speaking about economy, syempre, I mean, ekonomiya in the sense, hindi ekonomiya numbers, pero in the economics of a gallery, syempre, kailangan nila masabi, photo is art. Kasi parang, di ba? One of the places where you can view art is a gallery, is the white wall. But at this point, Diyos ko, bakit mo sa akin trabaho mo? Ganun na lang. Kung art yan o hindi, it's not up to me to judge anymore. I should be, since I'm a so-called critic or a writer of photography. But as long as it's image-based, or now the definition sometimes it has to be lens-based. To be honest, I'm not interested with its definition. I'm just so happy that as Steph pointed out, like 10 years ago, wala kang makikitang show. Ngayon, hindi ako makapunta sa mga... Sabi ko, 10 years ago, when I had the energy and the free time to go to all of these, di ba? Parang, wala, pa isa-isa lang. Siguro, every quarter, 2-3 lang. Silver Lens, tapos may gagawin something. Tapos, may independent show sa Cubao X. Okay, ganyan. Merong parang painting / ano na ginawa dito. Ganyan. Ngayon, biruin mo sunod, ako yung walang oras. It's kind of depressing for my case. But again, going back to the original question, as long as I have the material, I'm good. Doesn't matter if it's art, if you define it or others see it as art or not. As long as you have the output, we'll see what we can do with it.
So yun. So maganda yung pinoint out ni both Steph and AG. Siguro balikan ko lang si Steph muna. One of the things that Steph mentioned is the idea of, as long as it's at the basic level. I think this is also shared by some practitioners na at the end of the day, as long as it's creative labor, I mean, there is labor involved in the form of creation. Then sort of that is art at the basic level. That could also mean life in itself. I mean, if you want to be general, life in itself, it's a creative labor and life is art. So that's the parang I think this was also mentioned by Wawi in one of her talks, no? So creative labor. So we are all artists in a way. Pero what distinguishes, for example, siguro yung sinasabi ni AG and also ni Steph would be the idea of legitimization, wherein in the term when we define contextually what is art, it's usually associated not necessarily with creative labor only. It also involves someone recognizing it as art. Na parang there's someone saying that yes, that is art. Parang for example, shooting street photography is for us for shooters, we will say that it's creative labor. But there's a specific maybe group of people who saying that's not necessarily art, that could be a hobby, that could be some artistic expression, but unless it gets inside some white wall as white space as AG mentioned, probably yun, parang may question mark lagi of that legitimization feature in the discourse. So would you agree? I mean, that's one of my observations. So would you agree with that, Steph? Yun dun sa
I would rather say that there's plenty of art out there that doesn't necessarily end up in the gallery. So that's whether it's created by a kid or someone in a mental institution, which is art brut. They don't necessarily end up in the gallery. And some of it, they fall off art history, the canon of art history. So that also includes photography. There's a lot of photography that falls out of the canon of art history, but lately they've been trying to include all of those, some of those.
So siguro I'll tie that in. So for example, Steph, you're fresh from you came back from Singapore, and in a way, the National Gallery of Singapore is in a position or exercised in a way their legitimization privileges. I don't know if it's a privilege or a responsibility. Regardless, in a way, contextually, the National Gallery of Singapore is able to define what is photography in Southeast Asia. And seeing some of the works, most of them have a tag of being art. So would it be possible if you describe siguro certain feature of how, at least sabihin natin regionally and through the eyes of or the lenses of the National Gallery of Singapore, how did they define photography as art? Or I mean in the exhibit.
Their stand is that photography has changing roles.
Okay.
And for example, it used to be to record portraits of monarchies to show power, but now it's in a gallery. So the role suddenly changed. It's for education. It's for public education. Or photojournalists. They're creating work to bring to light certain issues. Now, if you put that in a gallery, the context changes again. So that is one of the great things about photography. The roles and purposes and functions change. So if you look at it in the context of a national artist or the National Artist Award is arts and letters, so it includes literature. In a way, photography feeds into literature, especially I think photojournalism. They accompany each other.
So tama rin ba yung pagkaintindi ko? I mean, with the way you described it, for the National Gallery of Singapore, in a way, they didn't burden themselves by saying that photography is art. What they try to do, based on my understanding of what you're saying, is that in a way, parang for them, photography is some sort of a communicative language in the sense that in the sense that for us, when we talk about English or Filipino, you can construct sentences with English, but also you can use the same sentence or you can use verse to write poetry, prose, or epics. So in a way, parang in the same light, the way the National Gallery of Singapore contextualized photography is that it started with some sort of ethnographic plus historic applications, and then eventually it became parang yun, parang nagkaroon na ng artistic expression, nagkaroon na ng historical validation because it becomes a record of our 150 years as a, I mean, in the region. So tama yun, no? Yun yung parang in a way, parang yun yung critical dun sa how the National Gallery of Singapore tried to frame photography.
Yeah, they did not directly address the question of photography is art because for them it's a given. They just moved further past that already to how. Like even the first photographs taken of the region, which are ambrotypes, it's already arguably that's a very complex art form, even if the goal was to record what was happening in the colonies, or the goal was to record so they could show back to the countries where they came from how the peoples look like and the landscapes look like. Just to produce those ambrotypes is an art form, complex art form that until now people are having difficulty mastering actually.
So,
yeah.
So from there, so for example, yeah, maganda rin yung idea of the colonial usage. I mean, the colonial history of how photography was practiced or used. So siguro I'll turn over to AJ. So for example, AJ, one of the things that's critical to what Steph was saying is the creative labor. So similarly, to create something is art in itself. Pero most of your talks, you also discuss about artistic intent, meaning that, I mean, the way I understand when you talk about artistic intent is that it separates creative labor as compared to an idea or expression and that artistic intent, which is something that can only be derived from a creative agent, and in a way parang merong category of creative labor, and then there's artistic intent. Although they're not necessarily opposition to each other, I think most of your talks discusses artistic intent. So would you like to siguro talk a little bit more on that, because in a way that's how national artists are parang are judged, diba?
Yeah, kasama yun sa criteria ng kasama sa criteria sa national artist. Maybe I guess we can go about it later, but to answer the question for me, what do I mean when I say artistic intent or artistic ambition? Actually, the term I always use is artistic ambition rather than artistic intent. Because somebody necessarily doesn't have artistic intent, but their work can become artistic in nature. Anyway, but ibang usapan yun. But somebody with an artistic ambition, somebody who really wants their work to be art in a white space, or their work to become a photo book, to be exhibited, to be displayed, to be consumed as a piece of art. So, I mean, some way or the other, not some way or the other, may mga tao talaga na gusto yung gano'n. And I don't blame them. Go ahead, more power to you. With regard to, and that I think is what pushes photography na, kaya marami talaga nagpupush na art ang photography. Because it goes there. The medium in itself, when Paul Strand explored, photo history AJ, recall, when Stiglitz saw Paul Strand's work, straight photography, tama ba ako, Steph? Di ba? And called it straight photography. Ay, pwede pala to. Na ganun lang, kung ano mismo yung kinuhanan ko, yun na yun, art na siya in itself kasi nag-compose ako in high school exposure. Tsaka nilagyan ko ng, ito yung gusto kong ipakita. When he was able to form that triangle, when it clicked in Stieglitz's head through the work of Paul Strand, parang, okay, ganun pala yun. So, it's, for photography, quote unquote, that's why it became accepted as art, because it's a mix of, that exactly the labor, the artistic intent, and the message that the message you want to communicate. Now the question becomes, paano kung wala naman akong ambisyon? Gusto ko lang magpicture ng asawa ko maghapon magdamag at saka yung honeymoon namin. You'd never know. Papasok tayo sa
Ready sa props. Yeah,
hindi.
teacher.
Pinag-aaralan ko ulit ngayon to eh. Gusto kong gumawa ng TikTok eh. On one of my favorite photo books. Dude just photographed his honeymoon. For those who don't know, Nobuyoshi Araki sa Sentimental Journey. Diba? Ayan. Nobuyoshi Araki sa Sentimental Journey. Winter Journey. Dude photographed his honeymoon. One of the best pieces of photographic work this century or ever. But it's just him and his honeymoon and then death of his wife. So, hindi na parang, like, there's so many use cases and how it could be, and that's why I'm always stickler for, kumbaga, kaya tinatawag ako ng dean ko na formalist. Sabi ko, hindi ako formalist. Ayoko ng form alone. Gusto ko lang na nakikita ko, ano ba yung nasa trabahong nasa harap ko. I always start from there. Ano yung present sa akin na trabaho? The more that I get to know the work and things I know, the more na madadagdagan yung knowledge ng viewer. And so, let's segue it to the main topic. So when a work becomes recognized as a work done by a national artist, it's a state-imposed award. Sinabi ng Estado ng Pilipinas na, alagad ng sining yung gumawa niyan. Now it adds to the story of that work. Yun yung sa akin, parang I'm more interested in the narrative or a story of the work and the work itself. How did it affect others? How it's affected the artist. So the National Artist Award, as much as I am opposed to it, but we can get to that later, adds to the narrative of the work. Whatever is done, happened, like, I'm super interested into that. And dun papasok din yung sinasabi nga, the artistic labor, the artistic intent, whether or not there is, difficulty ginawa, kung magkano yung ginastos, kung kung paano tinignan, paano inubos, kung niyurakan ba siya nung una siyang nakita, kung may nanood ba, kung may tumingin, stuff like that. I'm super interested in the story of a work.
Siguro to add lang para din to our audiences. Yan yung mga kapwa namin, mga chismosa. Yung definition lang of why we have a distinction between creative labor and artistic ambition is that similarly, at least in the Western framework, that in a way parang distinguishes folk art versus fine art. So para dun sa mga interested about distinctions about fine art and folk art, at least in the Western lens. Kasi since in a way parang sila yung nagdetermine on how we define things of what is art. So parang in a way for the West, how they distinguish folk art versus fine art is that in folk art, for example, when someone crafts, parang sa kanila parang folk art, parang when someone makes a clay pot, there's creative labor in the sense that you created something out of clay, a material that's available in the sapa, diba, in the ilog, diba, kumuha ka tapos you make a clay. That's creative labor. Pero how the West has determined, defined it, it's folk art in the sense that it's merong artisanal part, meron siyang communal purpose, but there's just creative labor in the sense na nagput ng effort to make that object. Pero when you go to artistic ambition, sort of parang nangyayari diyan, nagkakatalo yung in a way parang it becomes idealist. So when you go back to the history of philosophy, then since most of the definition of art is within the framework or the domain of aesthetics, which is in a way aesthetics is also a Western construct. In a way, it's a lot of it is idealist. Now, for example, when you imbue an art object meaning, then that is sort of in the head of the people creating the thing and also the interpretation. So that becomes a domain within aesthetics. So when you go, for example, a Western would look at parang sabihin natin yung weaving of indigenous group. That's folk art. That's something that's within the community, but it cannot transcend the community. The value of the work cannot transcend the community. It just lies there. It's there. Unlike for them, fine art is something that is more general, more broad, applicable to nations, nationalities, parang beliefs. That's how they in a way they define what is fine art. So in a way, yun lang distinction para dun sa mga nag-join na parang why is there a parang dichotomy between creative labor and artistic ambition. Yun lang, to give you an idea why that is not necessarily opposition, but there is in a way parang distinction, at least in the Western eyes. So yun yung ano natin para to give you a framework for those who are joining the kwentuhan session. So given that EG, so you mentioned na ano to. So ito rin yung mga critical dun sa mga guide question natin para tuloy exam yung guide question natin, no. Since it's state it's state endorsed and historically it was formed by the former president so given that, would you even consider, I mean, it's existing na, diba? There are laws about it, and the order, yun yung official niya, diba? The order of national artists. So is it still relevant? Is it still relevant in the discussion as photographers in the framework of photography as art? Siguro the question also extends to Steph later. So is it still relevant to talk about legitimization of photography as art in the framework of a national artist?
Huwag na illegitimate ang photography. Illegitimate na lang. Huwag na
Diba?
natin isama sa katulungan. De, joke lang. For the purposes of discussion, I will engage. And here's the thing. Here's the only thing that you have to know about it. Photography falls under contemporary art. Not even the visual or allied arts. Sa category ng National Artist Award. Photography falls under contemporary art. And the entire process of the selection of the National Artist Award is it's a different thing altogether. That's why, first and foremost, the National Artist Award for me is a political award rather than an actual an award that actually is there that recognizes artistic achievement. Because the number one process for the National Artist Award is you have to nominate. That's it. You submit it to NCCA and CCP, all the forms, and even they need 1-by-1 color photo in itself, and like the body will have an affidavit of their nomination that it is true, plus curriculum vitae and all that. And so it has to be under a nomination. And even before we go to the entire premise of the National Artist Award, what role does an award play anyway with regard to a work? What is the point of an award? Not necessarily for photographer, but for any even creative endeavor. Of course, one can argue prize, syempre, diba? Prize. Of course, a select number of people putting recognition, a select number, like the Academy of Film and Sciences, when they give the Academy Award, they thank the Academy. They don't thank the people. They thank the Academy for conferring the award. Diba? Stuff like that. So, for the National Artist Award, you actually just have to thank the president for giving you the award.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because that's the and my ultimate measure for me of a good work or of artist recognition, part of it in the life of a work, who are the people who will remember the work? Who will remember the work? To who will this work last?
Okay.
Why are people parroting or showcasing the work? We are 100 years removed from the decisive moment. Up to now, street photography, decisive moment pa rin. Stuff like that. Why? Why is that the grand tradition has to exist? I'm not saying wrong or right, but I throw these questions back. What is the role? It's not so much. I don't have a stand on awards. It's on National Artist Award in itself, but for awards, mabubuhay yung photographer na walang National Artist Award. It's great. I mean, saya, di ba? Kasi katabi mo si Marco sa libingan ng mga bayani, woohoo, di ba? Kasama yon, sagot na nila yung burol mo, astig, manalo ka kapag buhay ko pa, 100,000. Kapag patay ka na, 75,000. Di na masama, tsaka medyo maangas yung kwintas na ibibigay, pwede na rin. Di ba?
Sa state dinner kasama ka lagi.
State dinner, national artist. Lalagay mo, alagad ng sining. Sa pangalan mo yun, na-apply ka ng visa.
So maganda yung pinopoint out mo, AG, na parang similar dun sa guide questions natin. In a way, parang we're saying na whether there's a National Artist Award for photography, for the community, photographers will exist. It doesn't need legitimacy from the government. Diba? So yeah, that's a very clear point that you're pointing. That's a very clear point that you're saying na parang conditional lang or parang bonus na lang na naging photographer ka tapos naging national artist ka na confer sa yung award. So so in a way for you parang it's okay to have but it's not required. I mean the community doesn't need. Diba? Parang the community, the photographic community, whether you're photojournalist or you're an art photographer, it doesn't need it. But since it's there, why not? Diba? Parang ganun yung...
Why not? Diyan eh. I mean, you know me. Yung mga ganun bagay na parang, bakit kayo hindi? Bakit? Why not? Somebody nominate somebody. Diba? Since it can be nomination. Go ahead.
Siguro so regarding that, meron ka rin nababanggit, parang you're touching on the idea of agenda din. Medyo critical din yung idea of the agenda, the national agenda, and also the agenda of the communities and the people and the groups that are doing the nomination. May agenda sila in doing that. So, Steph, you sent me parang diba? I mean, we talked about it in a way dun sa email natin. We were talking about some sort of controversies, I guess. So we're not, I mean, it's up to you if you want to go to the parang examples of the controversies that happened in the National Artist Award. It's up to you if you want to touch on that. But nevertheless, siguro ang i-highlight ko lang siguro for you to siguro parang give an insight on is there is an agenda built into the award. In the first place, there is, I mean, obviously, diba, there is. And given that, how do we arbitrate? I think there's also one question from Sir Julius de la Cruz. So how do you arbitrate among agendas? I mean, different agenda of different groups. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's the call of the president. So how do you navigate dun sa ano na yun, sa complexity na yun?
So first, the award is very controversial because I suppose everyone who's been reading the newspapers could see all the controversies surrounding the National Artist Awards because there's a process, a very meticulous process. But at the end of the day, the final call is made by the highest power in the land. So sometimes that negates some people's efforts and then their protests and whatnot. And this has gone on for not just once, but several years, several times the award was given. But your question to me, Tony, how do we arbitrate? Of course, I don't know.
Siguro ano, siguro for example, kasi ayun pala. Sige, so we'll be open to the ano. So we to the audiences or dun sa mga chikadora at mga chismosa na join tonight. Just to let you know, among the three of us, we already prior to this, we talked about parang there's a certain speculative nature on what we're doing in the sense that NCCA, NCCP cannot join tonight's kwentuhan. Actually, there are people who wanted to join, but apparently, we were flagged that but there are mitigating circumstances why we cannot have CCP and NCCA join tonight. Yun na lang. Just to let you know why, and because of that, in a way, the way we discuss this topic, it's a lot. There's a lot of speculation in the sense that, have you noticed that no one talks about it? No one talks about it, whether it's a school, even the winners, even the previous winners of the National Artist Award, they don't talk about it. They don't talk about what's happening behind the scenes. So there are mitigating circumstances why we cannot have CCP and NCC join us. But they mentioned naman na they wanted to, but again, there's something that
Tony, you're about to shoot yourself in the foot.
oh my, I'm going to shoot my foot
I'm going to
parang
stop before you shoot yourself in the foot.
I'll edit this out na lang, pero ang point ko lang is yun. So for the audience and also for us. Yun. So in a way, it's a lot, there's a lot of speculation what happens behind the scenes. Yun na lang. And given that, so to make this event na lang productive is yun. So for example, let's say na lang, if the voice, siguro what's important in this discussion is that at least a voice ng community. So let's say similar to what EG said, we don't need the legitimization of the government. The community can live on its own. But since it's there, might as well talk about it. Pero regardless of that, what's critical, I guess, in this speculation that we're doing is that how do we frame it? How do we frame it? Kasi nga, I mentioned before starting the kwentuhan, behind the scenes, then I was telling Steph and AG, even some of my students, they believe that photography is not art. So, I mean, in the sense that the artistic ambition, siguro they would agree that there's creative labor behind it, similar to giving, but that only extends to the point na parang pag nanganak ka, I mean, if you're a couple and then tas nagkaroon kayo ng anak, that's still creative labor. You create something creatively, diba? Pero, or making a pot na lang, we'll go back to the paggawa ng pot, diba? So that's creative labor. Pero when we talk about the National Artist Award, in a way, parang there's already a category in our heads that is defined through artistic ambition, parang historically, this person should more or less contributed to the field of photography, the definition of nationalism, diba? Yun yung mga discussion natin sa classroom when we discuss it in the classroom. So given that, do you want me to ask the question? Sino bang gusto niyo i-nominate? Pwede na siguro, no? Kasi yun nga, we're just speculating kung what's happening behind the scenes. But since we can only speculate, let's say tayo yung group na who would be nominating. Sino ino-nominate nyo? At bakit? Ano yung framework ninyo? Siguro, ladies first again.
Okay. So first I'm gonna say I'm highly underqualified. But okay, that said, I would nominate a photographer who has given his life's work. And a good example maybe would be a photojournalist, where you really put yourself in danger, but to bring these issues to the public, you risked your life. I think that's being heroic, and in a way it's even more deserving than national artists who have just contributed aesthetically. But also, if a photographer's body of work was enough to influence generations of photographers after him. That second category, I'm not sure if there is anyone yet. And that's only because I'm underqualified. I mean, I didn't study enough the bodies of work of certain people. I was wishing Angel Shaw would be here, but I did ask VJ Villafranca who he would nominate, and he said either Nap Jamir Sr. or Baldovino.
Dick Baldovino.
Yeah, that was his. That's who he was. Who he would nominate. But then I don't want to drag VJ in. He's not here.
Yeah. So, bakit ako name drop ni Steph dun sa
Nanahimik yung tao sa Cambodia eh. Nag-workshop sa Cambodia.
Yeah. Be like, oh, how was I napasama dyan? Yeah, so okay, maybe we can move on to AG.
Oh wait, ano lang, before we go to AG. So for the people joining this kwentuhan din. So to give you an idea of who Dick Baldovino is, he was a photojournalist, and also he was part of Dick and also Romy Bitog were part of that 1967 or 1968 exhibit, The Five Photographers, that is largely credited as more or less the first expression of photographers in the field in the Philippines. First effort to put it in an aesthetic framing. Not aesthetic, artistic framing na this is art. Not artistic as in aesthetic kasi as a photographer kadalasan there's already aesthetics built into it. Pero artistic in the sense that this thing that we're doing is art. That's what we refer to as artistic framing. So we're not referring to artistic as aesthetic, which is beautiful, hindi ganun . So yung critical doon kay Dick, in a way historically, there are texts and also writings like yung sinulat nila Gina Abuyuan. So kilala naman sige, yung iba kasi hindi nyo kilala. Pero nevertheless, there are texts existing that could support the conception of Dick as one of the possible nominees, I guess, in the sense that he was doing photography both for photojournalism or photodocumentary and also putting it in a gallery setup or framework wherein we're defining this is art. Kasama niya sila, diba? That Gallery Indigo exhibit is run by Ben Cab, and those 5 photographers exhibited there. So, and also Sir Nap naman, for the people who don't know yet, Nap Hamir is currently a professor of cinematography in UP, but in the 1970s, he's one of those photographers who really tried to expand the conceptions of photography practice in the Philippines, in the sense that he was one of the conceptualists. Siguro if we make a category between photographers, meron yung hardcore documentation photography, and then there's a separate category, or not necessarily separate, but there's a category who tried to explore photography conceptually. So Nap Hamir was one of them. Kasama dyan sila Judy Sibayan, sila actually Johnny Manahan. So if you know Johnny Manahan as the producer and the head of ABS-CBN, Johnny Manahan was also a conceptualist. So there's a group na and one of the yung kanila Chabet, the Chabet click. So basically those for further readings sa mga nag-join, that one category of photographic practice is one of the strongest tradition in Philippine photography history. And then there's the side of the documentary photojournalism, hardcore. Let's go cover the Mindanao struggle yun. So yun yung parang two distinct strong traditions in Philippine practice. Syempre may mga iba pa. So yun, so going back siguro kay AG naman. So na-mention ni Steph si Sir Nap and also si Dick, si Sir Dick. Hirap ba? Mas fere, ethnographic ba?
Sorry. Anyway, mid. Ako para masyak lahat, Brian Serio. Para, 'di ba, hubad-hubad, gano'n. 'Di ba, nudity, hyper-erotica, Brian Serio, pakita natin, national artist, photography. Jubaran. Joke lang. Although, shout out Brian. Hindi kasi I agree with Steph na one criteria, if ever I get to become the president, I get to confer the National Artist Award on say the entire Philippine photo land practitioners kasama sa nominees. At sinong nasa harap ko? One, I want to give it to first and foremost a photojournalist. And then somebody in the 1970s. To be honest, I want to give it talaga yung no question, gun to my head, sino kanino ko siya ibibigay. Kay Idol, Ray Albano. Idol, no question. Kasi, but then again, Ray is...
Visual arts.
Hindi, tsaka...
It's general.
Hindi sa kanya ibigay because he worked in CCP.
Correct.
One of the things in there is hindi ka dapat nagtrabaho or hindi ka dapat worker or employee ng CCP. Or NCCA. So, hindi pwede ibigay kay Ray Albano, pero Ray did all of it. He is like the guy. Anyway, yun na literal na idol. Pero going back, I want to give it to somebody who's alive. Because it's gonna need 100,000 pesos is gonna be better for somebody who's alive. Shout out sa mga patay na, but like much respect to you guys. I want to give it to somebody who's alive. I want to give it to photojournalists. I want to give it to also to somebody who's practicing it as an art talaga. And again, the artistic ambition. Not an artistic ambition. Basta yung nakita natin sa gallery. And there's so many in my head that I want to give it to. But even so, the exercise of this na pinagpipilian natin is such a gatekeeping thing that it's it's making
so that's part of your job, you know, di ba?
No, my job is not to confer awards. My job is to look at work and not to judge. It's to make connections for the audience. So take the name that I will, with a grain of salt na lang, or for our audience or those who will listen in the future, explore their work and see why I want their names to be included. Like, basta gusto ko muna sa buhay, the first person that came to mind was, actually, side story, dati, tawag dito, there was a Anya Nidringhouse Award for female practitioners of photojournalism. And I wanted to nominate this person for the longest time. I actually did run through the nomination process, pero life happened and hindi ko na mahanap yung file and kasi pwede ko namang i-resubmit ulit. I wanna give it to Nana Buksan. Kung influential lang ang pag-uusapan. Yeah. Kay Nana, bigay ko kay Na.
I think Nana is here.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Na! Ay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Bias aside for the audiences, those who don't know, ninang ko sa kasal sina. Pero, ay na.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Pakita ko mamaya si Jupiter. Kung hindi pa tulog.
But there are really, really good photographers now ng mga bata.
Yeah.
Amazing work.
Ang dami. Gusto ko sa buhay ko katulad nun. Kaya kay Na, gusto kong bigay. Kay Madam Judy. Si MM. Wowie. Like, all of them also are my friends. That's small circle. So, it's a difficult job for me. Because I just want to give it to everyone. Because everybody could use 100,000 pesos. Insurance. Medical insurance answered by the state. And free burial. It's absolutely lovely.
Pero tama si AG that it's a political award.
Yes. First and foremost, it's political award.
It's not a people's award. People don't nominate national artists. Unlike meron yata sa France, they have different awards for artists, whether photographers. Sebastian Salgado was given awards sa France for artistic, although he doesn't say he's an artist as a photographer. But it's the people who confer it to them. I think the word artist, it's not conferred by I don't know. It should be conferred by people who respect you sa art scene. I think yung award na yan. Plus the people who think yung naka-influence ng whether it's political or cultural. But sa Pilipinas, dahil highly charged and politicized ang National Artist Awards. So Although I really like some of the national artist awardees, no? So sa photography, dahil bata pa siya sa Pilipinas, ngayon pa lang nga siya show sa mga museums at galleries. It's too early to say or to, siguro exploratory, pero yun nga, kaya tingin ko medyo it will take some years siguro to recognize it as an art form or conferring an artist award to a photographer. I don't know.
And then, yun na nga, to jump off from Nana's point, that the nice and beautiful thing that, well, you could view it either way, but one of the nicest things about Philippine Photoland, as I'd like to call it, we're such a yun nga, we're so in our oral history. Like, oh, you have to look at this person's work. Oh, puntahan mo tong si ganito. Oh, kausapin mo yung na ganyan. So that in itself is so great, but it's also a curse in the sense na where's the archives? Because one of the things that you have to prove here in the National Artist Award is the body of work. Kasama nga din yung other awards governed di ba?
So it's kind of difficult. Kasi wala tayong, like sa photography, wala tayong single, although National Museum dati yung the museum director, may interest siya dati to open photographic, parang hindi naman gallery, parang a wing, photographic wing.
Photo wing.
Yeah, pero dahil wala rin silang budget, so they usually show mga may pera. They invite people with money to show there. So parang mahirap din kasi even documentary photographers I know are really not rich people. They're really struggling. So it takes a lot of years to build a body of work. So talaga siya, it's very difficult, no? Even my archives, I do it myself. Wala ko pambayad for someone to do scanning and archiving and all that.
Siguro
Dahil puro negatives pa siya. Unless meron talagang national body who would really do that and who gets paid kasi it's a lot of work, no?
So guys, just to let you know, Nana is si Nana Buksani is who AJ was referring to. So you can look her work up. So she's also, there's a lot of things also been written by about Nana. So
AJ ay inaanak ko.
Sa kasal.
Sa kasal.
Wow.
Na wala pa akong regalo hanggang ngayon. Oh my God. Pili ka lang dito sa bahay ko, AJ.
Again, kaya nga Tony, I'm the worst person to ask who I want to give National Artist Awards kasi parang I'm just gonna give it to everyone. Because parang si BJ, ninong ko, ninong ng inaano ko yan. Jeloy, tropa. Jeric, tropa. So parang diba parang I just want to I want my friends to grow. Diba? So in lieu of a National Artist Award, parang just give me in charge na, sino bibigyan natin ng grant? Jesus ko, yun. Archival grant or research grant, work grant. Anyway, lumalayo tayo dun sa initial Kasi ang dami. Like, Tito Edwin has been a family friend. Edwin Tuyay has been a family friend for a long time. So, it's so difficult for me.
Big archive.
Yeah.
Of mga presidents and, even movies, no? Sexy movies.
Saka, di ba, malamang nakakwento sa'yo yung phase niya na adult magazine phase niya na hindi niya pinapalagay yung credit.
Kaya ang tawag sa kanya penetration, di ba? Pero ang dami magagaling kahit sa mga oldies and goodies, tsaka even young photographers na. Yung award lang, kasi tama si AJ, it's a political award It's at the discretion of the president. Pero it should be supported by art-giving bodies, CCP, NCCA, National Museum, at iba pang mga consortium ng museums. Yun. So, I don't know. Even may AI na ngayon sa photography. No?
Mm. Yung ano, Nana, yung tungkol sa AI will have a the podcast next week will tackle AI. So ano yun. So that's the topic that we'll discuss next week. So we're trying to be as responsive to the contemporary issues of Philippine photography. So next week, yan, we can discuss the entire time. Actually, pero anyway, going back to the National Artist Award. So so there's this recurring idea na again nga. So by the nature of the award itself, it is conferred by the president, and it's a state.
And
It's a state.
nomination siya. At saka ano siya, napansin ko like, this past year, parang kailangan may mag-rally sa iyo ng mga people. Para kang para siyang, para siyang
Kina-campaign.
kina-campaign.
Yes.
Yeah. If you have more money, so many people would campaign for you.
I think
So if you can,
So yung
so there's
go ahead.
yeah, sorry. May mga ganon. So may mga people behind it. Hindi siya yung parang acknowledgement lang ng trabaho mo. Pero there's also that parang may pressure to parang 3 years yata yan na ika-campaign kanila.
So
hindi rin natin alam ano nangyayari behind the scenes sa campaign na yan.
So yun. So Nana, actually, I'm not sure if naabutan mo kanina, or we were saying that we want, I mean, the best way to make this productive initially was really to have NCCA and CCP. So we invited them. They're interested, but again, there are mitigating circumstances why they cannot join the discussion. But however, what they tried to inform us for this kwentuhan is that there are the existing materials or workflows and guidelines are available online. So that's why even before, 1 month ago, we all AG and Steph we were already looking at the process. So in terms of the award, it's given every 3 years. So I guess that the campaign that you're seeing is, again, since it's given every 3 years, so that 3-year campaign is within that 3 years. And then aside from that, since there's the idea of there's the concept of body of work, there's the picture of how good your work is. Body of work and also your influence. And then aside from that is yung historicity of how you were able to help build that national identity, because it's a national artist. There's a huge part of the deliberation which we can only speculate. Again, I cannot speak about it, pero yun, there's the huge part of the deliberation on how it reflects Filipino-ness, because the title itself is national artist, and therefore the definition of the national in the discussion, in the internal discussions, is very important na parang are you contributing something to the idea of national identity? Are you responding to a contemporary concern of the nation? So there's a lot of ways of how to frame the concept of national, and to give naman siguro benefit to the people behind it, although we also recognize a certain the politics is always there. I guess in all of, even the Oscars is a lot, there's a lot of politics in the Oscars, sa Urian, 'di ba, sa Gawad Urian, marami tayo, sa Star Awards, lahat yan merong, even lahat laging may politics involved. So assuming lang na the politics is involved in any award giving process, at least siguro to give the benefit of the doubt naman on the part of CCP, the government, and also NCCA, the flowchart. When you look at the flowchart, which is what I'm showing right now, and I'm sharing my screen. In this part, it was also emphasized to me by the people we consulted with before, that before doing this thing, the experts, the historians, the critics, the authors, the museum, the consortiums that you refer to, Nana, is actually part of deliberation, the special research group. So in a way, there's really the academe naman to give siguro there's academic value or academic weight in the discussion. So it's not purely all politics. So in a way, parang as you mentioned, there are national artist awardees naman na talagang they're good. They really contributed something to the history of art and history of the Philippines as a national identity. And most of those people are within the special research group. So they're tasked to build a case. Parang sila yung parang sila yung taga to build a case. Yun yung trabaho nila. Parang sila yung lawyers to create a case for this person for that nomination. And then after that, there are two or three deliberations which papasok din dito. There are members of the special research group who are part of the council of experts and parang nangyayari every each of the deliberation. Some of them are stays, some of them are parang nababawas. So, pero at the end of the day, just like Steph and AG mentioned, at the end of the day, it's conferred by the president. So in a way, there's para siyang pwede siyang mag-veto. Sasabihin natin, binigay mo lahat ng academics and lahat ng art historians and the entire community. Let's say even the Philippines is clamoring for that person to win. There's a possibility that, I mean, in the case of the 2013, I mean, kasi no case, well, let's not mention the specific cases. Pero nevertheless, baka ma-censor tayo, ma-read that tayo. Pero anyway, pero ang point ko lang,
I-edit mo naman eh.
edit ko naman. Guys,
I-edit mo naman.
So yan, para lang din sa mga sa mga participants, you would see na at least the politics is a given in all our giving process. But nevertheless, I think one of our guide questions also was that in the discourse aside from the oral history that EJ was mentioning and in the practice which Steph mentioned, that when you go to the galleries, there is recognition, at least in practice, that photography is art. But when you go to the National Artist Conference, the conference award, merong jury or merong special research team. And this research team usually gets written work, aside from the body of work itself, the criticism, the literature, the historical context, writings about this person, that becomes part of the deliberation. So question ko ngayon, to make this discussion productive lang, and also to move it forward, is there enough writers, or at least writings, not writers muna. So is there enough writings on the discussion of photography as art, aside from the Western sources? I mean, as teachers, most of us are teachers. We know that most of the texts written for the argument of photography as art is Western-based. In the Philippine context, is there any writing that, I mean, we can bring into the discussion na photography is art and this is how it should be practiced, aside from Wubin, Guardiola, and Silva? Yun yung silang tatlo usually yung mga references. So John Silva and Jonathan Best. You have Guardiola, so si Juan, which is a Spanish, who made that exhibit sa CCP. And also you have yung contemporary si Wubin na kasama natin isang last month. So given that, is there enough writings, at least literature, to support the discourse? So I'll go to siguro kay Steph muna, and then AG, and then later we'll open the floor to questions para at least we can manage then the question. So thank you, Nana, for having that input. So later we can go back to your.
Thank you. Nakinig lang ako kasi interesting itong discussion na to.
Tsaka ni-nominate ka pa ni AG, diba? So yan. So siguro
Hindi ko alam yun Ngayon ko lang nakita yung kung sino yung nasa participants list. Tsaka pala na, hi.
Medyo na-late ako kasi pero
So,
I think yung interesting is very interesting yung yung question na, is there enough writing or is there enough
documentation, at least, diba? Documentation.
Yeah.
So Steph, in your practice, because among the three of us, ikaw talagang may expertise of curatorship, diba? So and part of the role of the curator, aside from preparing the exhibition itself, is the writing that supports or articulates the works and the exhibit itself. So is there enough writings?
There are some writings, aside from the ones you mentioned, because there are many ongoing shows in galleries with photography, and all of those have exhibition text. One of the biggest, I suppose, efforts was there. Maybe 4 years ago, there was Not Visual Noise, which was at the Neo Art Gallery, curated by Angel Shaw, and a book was produced, and there was writing for that. But for the gallery shows, the ongoing shows, all have like the one at Gravity Art Space, curated and written by Christine De Leon. And then the show that I brought you to, Tony, at Finale Art File with Celine Lee and Miguel Lorenzo Uy, that was written about by Koki Lee, curator and writer Koki Lee. The one I brought you to at Art Informal by Zian Cabanges, I was the writer. The ongoing show of Corinne de San Jose, I'm not sure who wrote the exhibition text, but there will be exhibition text, or there should be. They're for exhibition. So maybe many photographers just don't realize that there are writings, or nobody gathered them all up. And maybe if we do gather it all up, it's more than we think.
Siguro before we go to AG, since AG also writes, no, I mean, he's a critical writer and also he developed a fine arts program in one of the schools that we know. But before we go to AG, so ito rin yung question siguro, Steph, no? I mean, historical. I mean, when we discuss nationalism and how it's framed under the domain of artistic identity, since I think yun yung siguro yung different, I guess, in the kaya nga ginawa natin site of legitimization yung national artist discussion, because what's different from this framing is that it talks about a national identity. So I guess going to what you said, most of the exhibition text that we see or what we have talks about an exhibition as an articulation of the exhibit. So it's basically self-contained in that expression, in that event, diba? In that historical event of that exhibit. Going beyond those small spheres of exhibitions and those self-contained, coherent articulations of art, would you know of any context or writing na medyo mas a broader, something that would take, for example, what makes the work of Corinne national, what makes the work of sabihin natin Poklong national, what makes the work of Wawi national. I mean not necessarily that they are trying to define nationality. I mean this in the sense that how does the specific exhibition, if there are writings, is there specific writings or references that we can read wherein it goes beyond the scope of an exhibit? So, and siguro articulates that idea of national, the discussion of the term national, whether it's a response to a national contemporary term or a definition of a national identity. So,
okay. Well, I'm going to have to give very specific examples to show the point. When you read the exhibition text, let's say the one of Corinne, actually, I did not read it. I mean, yet, because it literally just happened at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and then I had to come here. But she did tell me what it was all about, and it was her obsession with the Filipino archetype of the Lagang Bukid. And the very first film made, which no longer exists. So she speculated on what that film would be. So by her ideas alone, she's talking about national, the Lagang Bukid archive. Archetype. It still touches on identity, except she expresses it. She bridges the gap. These are AI generated images, but she puts them in. She executes them using cyanotypes. So she's bridging She's bridging techniques across centuries. Then one would know if one reads like the other example is, let's say, Poklong. Those photos that ended up in living pictures in the National Gallery in Singapore are photos of ordinary people. Well, actually his friends, but we don't know who they are because the flash obscures their face. They're holding up mirrors to their faces. It's his way of portraying how people need to be anonymous now when they protest to protect their identity. So then if you go into the details of what the exhibition is, there is notions of identity or things the nation is concerned with. Then it's better than just generalizing. It's really more important if people just read these texts.
So yung so for those who are interested, so we may mga minsan we meron nag-name drop kami minsan dun sa mga nag-join tonight. So sometimes we name drop people. So if you're a street photographer or you're in commercial photography, baka the names that we're mentioning might be new to you. Pero we highly encourage you, I mean, for the better appreciation of photography in general, whether it's framed as art or whatever, or being Filipino. So yung the names that we're mentioning, so these are people specifically, in a way, I don't want to say click, diba? I mean, pero they're usually in the practice of photography as art. So yun. Kaya rin yung framing natin is national artist, because as mentioned a while ago, there's a great tradition within the Philippine photography practice of the documentarist and the artist. So yun yung parang two large traditions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's totally separate. Some photographers in one side also practice things in the other side. For example, Jess, he's fine arts. Now, I mean, he's a photojournalist, but he's also doing art, diba? But just to give you an idea, yun yung great traditions in Philippine history that more or less has writings about. The one that is documentary, so that includes ethnographic, historical, so then yun sila Maspere, diba? And then you go to the artistic side, papasok dyan sila Proto-Martyr, tapos itong mga contemporaries natin, sila Corinne de San Jose, sila Poklong, diba? Tapos yung the photographer itself, that's why in the Philippines, the photographers sometimes have parang identity crisis. I think we're going to discuss this separately siguro in another podcast. Because in the Philippines, when there are parang may parang may identity politics of, are you an artist or are you a photographer? In the Philippines, parang that distinction is a bit stronger than as compared to other countries. In the other countries, if you're an artist and then you get referred to as a photographer, it's okay. I mean, it's a non-issue. Or if you're an artist and then you're referred to as a photographer, in other countries that's not an issue. But in the Philippines, there's a strong political parang turmoil in the sense that in the identity of some practitioners, wherein do I have to identify as a photographer or do I have to identify as an artist? And I think that is also one source of conflict within the community and also the internal conflict within a practitioner. So going back, so itong si Poklong, as you can see in the sharing, this is his work. So the first time I encountered Poklong was in Silverlands back in 2007, when we had that first legitimization practice of artist photography as collected art. So I was also part of that exercise, the first quote unquote legitimization of collected art, collected photography as art. But so you can look up his work. And now Poklong is part of that Singapore exhibit that Stephanie was visited just this week. So and then yun, so ito yung kaya siya anonymity, yan yung title niya. So si AG. So going back, so we're in the discussion of, is there enough written text aside from, I mean, documentation na lang, not necessarily organized documentation. I think in terms of the documentation, Wu Bin Wubin would argue that there are enough documentation. So Wubin is also a writer from Singapore who has come up with a book about Southeast Asian photography. Wubin would probably argue there are enough documentation. However, organized writings and criticism about history, articulations of artistic practice in photography, that is what's missing. So going to AG, since you are a critic, you are a writer, you're a journalist in a way, do you think there is sufficient? And if there's none, how do we increase the army, the writers, yung tayo, I mean, the people who document through writing and analysis?
Make it an appealing career. It's not an appealing career, writing about photography. It's not even a career. You have to do other things to actually write about photography, right? Like who are the best currently writing about photography right now? Like Nicole Soriano is so good. She's writing also in general about art, not just about photography. Like her observation of the thread of Philippine photography as tawag dito, as tenderness. Amazing. Pero pang isa nakakatawa, kaka-follow lang sa akin, kakabasa ko lang. Wala lang sa utak ko ngayon, visit. Like there are many who are writing, but nobody's reading. Why do you think I want to do TikTok and Reels? Because that's where the market. Tarzier started their TikTok already because that's where the market is. And TikTok has more possibility of paying this type of content rather than actual, our institutions or organizations that you want to see it that way. And I tried the academic route. No offense to my former employers. I tried the academic route, but the requirements are just too insane. To be able to, I have to do this paper, I have to do this or bibliography. Can I just write? No, you can't. So the gallery route, when you look at it, amazing. Dami. Just compile through the years. These galleries will have their archive, hopefully have their archives in order, as Steph has pointed to us now. Like, gaganda niyan, especially inside the tidbits. And my ultimate dream is to have like a contemporary version of Philippine Art Supplement. The closest thing we had was Carlos Quijón did something in the lockdown during the lockdowns. I forgot the name right now. Dagdag mo lang siya show notes mo. Besides reflections of happily I was invited. I wrote about Carlo Gabuco. Parang reflections on art. So it's art writing, different So para sa akin, the material is there, it's sufficient, it's organizing the material. Somebody who would do that, somebody ought to. Don't look at me, I don't want to do that. And to be honest, is it needed in comparing? Kasi the NCCA and the CCP, how I understand the National Artist Award ever since I studied about it during the controversy of 2011, the National Artist Award controversy of 2011, doon ko unang binasa yun kaya ako na parang, ano ba itong National Art? Itong kakaguluhan. Because I always thought na, okay, the National Artist Award was, given to people who are good. But when I looked into it, oh my God, the politics of this award, why does this award have to exist? And ever since I didn't have so do you need the writing to confer this award? Why? The president will sign off on them. Kaya sabi ko, it's so hard for CCP and NCCA to gather all the evidences and listen to the campaigns and pleas of the nominating bodies. But the end person, when it should be a magisterial award, a magisterial task by the president. Napipirmahan mo lang to Pero former President Macapagal Arroyo changed the game in the sense that, you know what, I'm gonna add names. Thank God the Supreme Court was like, no, you can't do that according to the Republic Act. You just have to sign off. Diba? You can be a nominator, but that's not how it works. You have to go through the process. Thank heavens that happened. So if there is one change, yes, there, Tractions, Experiment in Art Writing. Sorry. Thanks, Jack. Fantastic read for everybody who wants to, Carlos is always great in that regard. Anyway, going back. So, for me, if I'd rather see grants talaga. I'd rather see grants or again, Philippine Art Supplement, contemporary style, something like that, a magazine or funded by the state. I'd rather see something like that than the National Artist Award. The nice thing about the National Artist Award really is just the insurance. Not even the cash money. It's 100K. You go overseas, nobody cares. If you go to the Magnum offices, hindi natin ako, nalo National Artist Award. Punta ako sa Magnum, hoy, tanggapin niyo ako Magnum, National Artist of Filipinas. Nobody would care. So, it's the discussion, as much as it's nice, it is actually tawag dito, marami siyang nabubuksan. Marami siyang nabubuksan na other conversations that we should be having. One of them is, can somebody compile all the writings? Can somebody do all the archiving? Can somebody make the job of CCP and NCCA not frustrating? Because they're gonna do all this work. The person like, ay, hindi ko sila trip. Wala national artist ngayon. Ay, hindi ko to mga patron. Wala national artist ngayon. So, kumbaga, if there is a reform in the National Artist Award, at least in the policies and the rules, number one, put photography in the visual arts, not in contemporary art. Minor tidbit thing could be argued ad infinitum. Number two, dapat magisterial award na lang siya. Number three, actually rely on the writings or make this an avenue. Make this a National Artist Award should be an avenue. Pivot to, ito yung bias natin as educators, pivot it to education na ito yung mga dapat pag-aralan, which is kaya nga siya order ng mga national artists. But let's have a component na kaya sila naparangalan kasi ito yung ginawa nila, ito yung body of work, ito yung writings about them. Which will not be possible if this is just, kumbaga, that's the reform that could be made around the National Artist Award. Na archive of knowledge is not the term I'm looking for. Kumbaga, dagdag natin National Museum. Na sila yung magiging in charge. Dinagdagan ng trabaho. Presidente nag-utos ng
Actually, merong magandang input si Sir Julius de la Cruz. So one of the things kasi na ako rin I have observed na although let's say I think just to review what we've discussed so far before I talk about siguro something to do with something productive kasi since it's 8:25, so after this siguro we open to questions and then after that we conclude. Pero siguro to make it productive in the sense that again one of the disclaimers of this discussion is that it's going to be largely speculative in the sense that although our friends outside who are hirap naman ito kasi
not in Photoland. Lagay mo na lang
the people who are in a way involved they cannot join. So they already mentioned that the deliberation is something that is confidential. So no one will ever know it. No one will ever know it. It's easy for us also then to say na it's largely political. It's easy for us to say that at the end of the day, it's the president, especially with the precedents of what GMA did in 2011 up to 2013, if I'm not mistaken, yung kay we don't see. Well, let's not give names masyado. But nevertheless, assuming that it is what it is, and the politics is one of the heart and soul of it, since it is a state conferred award. One of the things that we try also regardless if this is a bit speculative, is to make it productive in the sense that probably the National Artist Award, as you mentioned, EG, this is parang bonus na lang yan sa community, but we can exist without it. So that's a very clear, and I really affirm that we don't need this, but it's a good thing to have. So given that internally within the community, there are sites of legitimization. And when I say legitimization, I guess what I'm saying is that it doesn't necessarily mean in the parang hegemonic or authoritarian way. Now, when we usually in conversations about legitimization, it's usually parang idea is top down. I have control. I decide what's gonna happen. I mean legitimization, I guess, in the sense that there are sites. So we don't. So the way I refer to legitimization is not necessarily individuals and groups, but actually sites of legitimization. In the sense that documentation is a site of documentation is a site of legitimization. Museum collections is a site of legitimization. Discourse, which we are having right now, is a way na to legitimize an issue. If we go Foucault, diba? So the more that we talk about it, the more legitimate it becomes. That's what I mean. So to clarify lang when I say legitimization. And as of now, how I see it, one of the mention of Sir Julius is that does the school, let's say, devoid of all influences from the government and the state apparatus, Foucault talaga, no, state apparatus. Nevertheless, devoid of that, aside from the government, what are other sites that we can work on? I mean, specifically for us. I'm working in Binil and we're trying to find also a way how to, legitimize in the sense, again, it's not in an authoritarian manner. We're saying that an issue becomes legitimate if we discuss about it. That's what I mean. It's not necessarily democratic, but it's functional and analytic in the sense that a critic would usually be a legitimation agent. Hindi naman niya dinidictate what is good and what's not. But he has an analysis, he has a framework on how he says that this is valid work and this is parang so-so work and this is something that is worth showing to the world. Kasi aside from that, one of the concerns, sige, let's not talk about national artist. Parang a mini brother or sister of the National Artist Award is the dangal ng lahi. No, sige. I'll focus on that. The Dangal ng Lahi Award. If you look at the photographer who keeps on winning that, so si Sir Joseph ba? Ebiosa, tama ba? So there's a person who keeps on winning that award because one of the requirement is that it's an award. You should get an award outside the Philippines. That in a way, you are a privileged creative agent because you are showing the world what is Philippine photography. And since it's an NCCA award, some people would argue that maybe Sir Joseph, sorry, Sir Ibiosa, Jofel, should be considered as a national artist in the discussion of national artists. But when you look at his work, some people would argue that is it worth discussing as a legitimate artistic national expression? So in a way, what I'm saying is yun nga, at the end of the day, regardless of the state apparatus, are there other sites of legitimization, not in an authoritarian manner, but in a parang analytical and discursive manner. So I think si Wubin also mentioned another site of legitimization, which is the camera clubs. Interestingly, he was saying, one of his thesis or one of his claims is that photography as art can only be legitimized if you look at the camera clubs, because in terms of numbers, it's actually the camera clubs who says functionally, not analytically. They don't say how it's defined. They're just saying that this is art. This is when you go to FPPF, diba? So they're saying that we are teaching the art of photography. So by function and by definition, what they're saying is that this is art. But a lot of us, for diba, syempre, for the academy, some of us would have a question mark. Is it really art? Diba? So what are other sites? So AG mentioned the academy. Steph mentioned the galleries. Are there any, I mean, I would know, siguro I would argue na maybe podcast can also be a start. So, parang mini discourse in the sense. So are there any sites of legitimization that we can come up with? Any Steph, maybe?
Well, there's Photomoto. I mean, there are a gazillion talks. There are
Tama.
billions of during Photomoto. So the upcoming Art Fair 2023 in February has a huge presence of photography. Maybe about 5 or 6 booths are all photography, as was in past years. So that is a huge amount of legitimization. Yeah.
Oh, actually, I think you've been quoted. I talking to other people, your work. I mean, the work of Photomoto, and you being a curator, being the curator of that, is currently is being cited as one of the parang the more forceful or parang more popular parang sites of legitimization. So congratulations, Steph, no? Tapos si AG, basically the work of the critic, I think that is one very important. And AG, aside from yourself, are you part of any writing organizations or communities that maybe some of our guests could join in a way, parang at least for them to this is AG, this is how AG and Carl, diba sila Carl, they write about they write about arts here, right? They write about art. Is there any way that they can access, I mean the guest, is there any way they can access your writings? O sige, ikaw na lang muna, tapos and then siguro you can mention some other writers.
Shameless plug, readingphotographs.asia, reading photographs Substack, shameless plug. Nasa Instagram din. No, they sites of legitimization. I am such a big community guy. I am that first and foremost. Again, going back to the oral history of Philippine photography, or PH Photoland, as I'd like to jokingly call it. It is really just oral history / community. My favorite thing about it is pretty much everybody is open. It's open. Everybody is in there. Could move in or out. The way that you stay in there, in a sense, stay in there, is when you're engaging and you're working. Kasi in a sense, that's where you get the legitimacy. At least amongst us. Kasi from there, dun siya lolobo, or dun siya, hindi ko masabi sa English, Tagalog na lang, dun siya gagalamay, dun kikilos.
The network effect.
Exactly. Like one of my favorite stories was, I saw this zine na yung Face of Marcos Apologist, made by kids well, they're not kids anymore. They're now amazing adults. Made in UP Los Baños, then became one thing led to another, then became to a book. Stuff like that. It seems organic. Like with Tarzier, I remember not knowing about them. Then I got an invite, and then they were like, "Hey, we know you." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Oh wow, thanks. It's nice to be seen. Always nice feeling to be seen." And now Gio and the Gentlemen of Tarzier are like regular staples. So you constantly have to be in there. Why is it a huge deal for a certain segment of PH Photoland Anchor Photo Festival? Because it's to a lot of people, it was, diba, na tawag dito, since you're part of it, since you're being seen, you attended the festival, parang, ang dami natututunan ng mga tao doon. Sometimes you don't even need to be part of the workshop. Just attending it, looking at the slideshows, looking at what's happening is already an amazing experience. Or Georgetown and Penang and other things. So what I love about that is, one, it's not an actual organization. It's not, wala kang mga bylaws or mga council that you have to answer to. So you can move in and out. You just show work. it's so fluid, it's so organic, it's pretty much in the ethos of yung party mode ng 1970s nina Ray. Or when I hear stories from Nana, Tito Edwin, Ka Luis, yung mga sa dark room, jamming sila doon, or after ng mga trabaho, yung nagde-decompress, sama-sama. It's in that tradition. Kapag may exhibit opening or gallery opening, di ba, yung mga, alak, or yung dyan, kamusta? Like even us, pag-log in natin, nung tayong tatlo, kamusta? Ano ginagawa mo ngayon? Ganun. So for me, the legitimacy is not so much in public. Like I'll let the public do its public thing. But amongst us as a community, parang, oo nga, ang galing talaga ng trabaho nun. Uy, tulungan natin si ganito. Lagi may ganun. Uy, si ganyan. Sumakit yung ganitong donation drive or print sale. I absolutely love that. And for me, that's why I'm such a stickler of, I just want to see work. Art, if an award comes with it, great. If it's recognized internationally, fantastic. But I just want to see how people are working. I don't even confer good or bad work anymore. Dati kasi parang maganda ba ito? Hindi, parang pakita mo lang sa akin. Then let's see what you want to do with it. Ganun na lang. Ganun ako. Like, I guess that's how fatherhood changes somebody. But I'm digressing.
Mas mellow ka na ngayon.
Oo. So it's not up to confer legitimacy. Maybe if, 'di ba? My dean pointed out, kasi pag nagsulat ka, ibig sabihin you took the time to actually analyze, understood, explored, and research about the work. My dean threw that curveball on me sa mga discussions namin before. Shout out Javier Laurel. And I told him, perhaps it is, but it's not up to me. Bahala na akong babasahin. Because sometimes when I write, I don't have any expectation that it will be consumed. For my newsletters, I only get a readership of 200. I will spend weeks and weeks, but only 200 people would read it at most. Like, I'm not saying na, sana dumami, of course, di ba? Kasi parang ma-monetize. Para naman yung aking creative labor sa magkaroon ng monetization. Point is, what is important to the artist? Is it important to the practitioner to be recognized as legitimate? Or is it important to the practitioner to have the work out there?
So yun, so maganda yung input ni AJ na at the end of the day, syempre we're framing it under national artist for photography as a parang a starting point, but I mean especially for the people who are here, and also when you get to watch this video, there's always this idea that as a photographer or an artist, regardless on how do you call yourself, that the main responsibility and the legitimization is actually just doing work. And that's it. And it starts from there. And the external agencies or the gaze that is doing the value judgment, whether it's good or bad, in a way they're contingent to the legitimization. At the end of the day, that the work, the first person who says this is photography and quote unquote it's artistic or it's art is the person creating it. And everything is contingent, whether it's the gallery system or it's the school system, is it the critic, or it's the government. So yun. So that's a very good point na AJ highlighted. So with that, siguro I'll conclude some key points na lang nung ating discussion, and then let's open the floor for people to ask. So yun. So siguro we started out with trying to define, I mean, at least have an argument regarding is photography art. And we mentioned two frameworks, or at least strategies. One would be creative labor, which is basically just creating something out of nothing. So if you want to discuss metaphysics and also physics, that's also creative labor. Basically, the fact that there was nothing there, and then you decide and then you created something out of nothing, then that's creative labor. And that's in a way would be inclusive in the sense that it would include fine art, folk art, diba? So indigenous art, performance, dance, music. So medyo mas inclusive yung creative labor. In a way, it's a bit Marxist in the sense that the measure of artistry is something that you put effort into. So in a way, it's a bit Marxist in a way. So anyway, so yun yung creative labor. And then another side of the discussion or the framework of photography as art could be the artistic ambition, in the sense that when you create something, in a way, there is an agenda for you to create it outside the immediate community or immediate use. So for example, creating a clay pot is different from making a work that discusses climate change. So for example, if we use Martha Atienza, or if we use Jet Pascual, if I'm not mistaken, and then the one doing the tungkol sa climate change with Pag-asa na artist in photography. So if tama ba? Oh yun.
Derek Tumala.
Yes. Ano yung first name niya?
Derek.
Derek Tumala. So he's doing, so basically, in a way, the artistic ambition there, the agenda behind it is that we have to make known the concerns of the contemporary, which is one of them would be one of the more existential ones, is the climate change. And he's using art and photography and documentation to do that. So in a way, that's a clear example of artistic ambition. So it doesn't necessarily mean to be legitimized. Hindi yun ang agenda niya. Ang agenda niya is to make something known. So it goes beyond the periphery, or at least the immediate periphery of the work itself. So it goes beyond that. So in a way, so again, so creative labor and artistic ambition are not necessarily separate. But in a way, it's also a way of distinguishing things in our field. So yun one of the frameworks what we use in defining photography as art in the Philippines. And number two, after that, we mentioned that the national artist for photography discussion is in itself built right into it. It's a political process. The process of award giving is a political process by definition. Something chooses. The fact that something chooses, an award giving body chooses, regardless if it's Orian, Oscars, the National Artist Award, all of these are political processes, and there's an agenda. And in this case, the agenda is national. It's a state-governed activity. However, we said that the community, the photographic community, can exist without it. We don't need it, but it's good that it's there. So in a way, it's a reward for us, or it's a way, parang plus points na parang pag na-award ka. And then moving forward from there, we also mentioned something to do with the community as a legitimization body. So instead of focusing on the government to legitimize us, we legitimize ourselves. And currently, the sites of legitimization are varied. So that could be camera clubs, you have the academe, you have the historians, you have the texts, you have the critics, and then you have the gallery system. So those are sites of legitimization. And then there's this concern of the two traditions of photographic practices in the Philippines. Kasi I was also surprised that the two of you, when you talked about the National Artist Award, you actually cited a photojournalist first, and not necessarily a person who practices photography in the Philippines that tags himself as an artist with a camera. And that's very interesting for me, because I was actually expecting you to give parang quote-unquote artist, and you were giving photojournalist. I mean yung pinaka-initial ninyo, diba? Pero you also went to discuss Poklong, you also Wawi, and you gave names. You gave a lot of names. And then from there, we also mentioned that one of the things that what we can do to contribute in this legitimization from the community, bonus na lang yung sa gobyerno, is that we continue discussing. So the discourse continues, and that in itself is a legitimization process that is more productive on ourselves in the community itself. Because at the end of the day, the National Artist Award, it's good, but is it really that productive to the community, probably because it becomes aspirational for practitioners in the Philippines. But there are other ways to be more productive, which is in a way sabi nga ni AJ and ni Steph, just participate. We have our own bodies or at least practices wherein we legitimize, like Photomoto, contemporary art. We have ArtFairPH, you have Ateneo Art Gallery, you have the Academy of the writers, diba? So yan. So at least we can be more productive if we focus on that, diba? So in a way, we can, in a way, engineer a national artist for photography if we start discoursing about it. So the timeline could be 5 to 10 years, maybe, we don't know yet. So with that, siguro, in a way, yun yung summary of the way I got it. So Steph, you can also add, AJ, you can add. Let me know, and then I'll turn it over to the audience if they have questions. Ano ba na sinabi ko? Teacher talaga. Pasensya na.
Yeah, so, nag-recap.
Oh,
Okay, lesson for today. As program chair, parang, kuwari assessment, faculty assessment. Aba, okay, may recap sa huli. Anyway, no, thing I actually want to throw to the audience is this. Do you think the efforts that the Photoland community is enough? Or, I mean, I'm sure it's enough. But is it approachable? Like, hurt pa rin ako ng onti ng pumunta nung nung portfolio review. Parang, sayang to eh. Pero yung mga, baka sabi ko nga, it's December and it's the first, diba? I guess it was just that. It was December, the first time that pandemic restrictions eased. And I was so happy. Parang, may portfolio review ulit. So I was really happy with that. At libre pa. So parang onti pumunta. So I'm always curious as to what opportunities kaya or are wanted, and at the same time, is it approachable? Or approachable is not the term. Is it inclusive? There. Yun I guess it's something for the community to ponder. That I'm also pondering. Right? Iniisip ko rin siya, parang, are we doing it the right way? I guess so. I guess. I hope.
Wala talaga.
Anyway. Go, Tony.
Walang quick question, walang quick answers talaga, no, EG?
Oo, hindi. I mean, the critic. So, hindi talaga kailangan ng instant answer. It always has to linger and simmer and dapat marami pagdaanan. Anyway, yun yung sa mga pinag-aanuhan ko lang.
Virtually.
Minilay-nila.
Steph, before we open the floor for questions.
It's okay. Let's open for questions.
Okay. Okay, guys, sige, let's read dun naman to sa mga nag-type na. So, oh my God, ang dami niyong tab, sir. Joke lang. Private message pala yan. So, Mr. Pasensya na. So, yan. So, si Sir Julius, in a way, parang we've addressed your question. Does Saint Benigno have a published book on photography? This is something that it's not a work in progress, but it has been an idea that most of the people responsible in the program are considering. Not necessarily when we say publish books also, you're referring to published books. Books, it's something that we've been thinking about. Pero other ways of creative research or creative documentation, we have some programs. Ako, regardless if I'm part of BNILD or as an individual, someone who really loves photography and believes that photography has something to do with nationalism and with identity. So I have this. So we have Photography Chismis, and there's a lot of things that we're working on for the year. So actually we already have a program until March. So we have podcast aside from the writings that we do in Photography Chismis PH. So in a way, these are informal and maybe siguro quote unquote illegitimate or non-authoritative ways of trying to document, journalize, document and express, diba, the idea of legitimization. I would also include siguro in the discussion na Mapua, PWU have already started their journals. So they have academic journals talking about media studies in the Philippines. Well, syempre may media studies na before, pero yung medyo well, officially they started parang 2 months ago. So PWU and Mapua. So they have that. For DLSU, there are professors who are actually writing about photography and pornography. So the history of photography vis-a-vis pornography, because that's also image making with the use of photography. And that is also an interesting topic that no one talks about. But that is historical, that has effects or idea, or those have implications on our identity as male, female, quote unquote, our gender, our nationality, our national identity. So that guy, si Dr. Cao, he's working on that. And then Ateneo is also trying to legitimize photography as philosophy. So we have an episode with Dr. Ramon Barbosa, I think in February. So that's philosophy of photography, because when you go to UK, to the US, they have a journal already about photography as philosophy. They don't talk about cameras anymore. They're talking about the nuances and the embedded processes within the cultural consumption of photography. That is not, they're not even talking about aesthetic. They're talking about the patterns of behavior and the metaphysical embedded in photography. So yun yung philosophy of photography, which I hope Dr. Barbosa would further explain in his podcast. So I'm inviting him. So we're just trying to figure out a date. So marami pang naka-line up. So published books, it's something that people should work on. And also yun nga, in journals, the academic journals. Kasi possible naman na even if you don't have a book, a journal could be a start na specific that could start a chapter in a book. So AG would know because he also worked on a fine arts program. So the academic journals is a good source. Traction, experiments in art writing po yung writing experiment ni Carlos Quijón. So AG, would you mention this?
Yeah, yan yung yan yung tawag dito kasi I forgot the name no art writing thing na ginawa ni Carlos no lockdowns, yun. Tractions experiment in photo writing. Anyway, books on Philippine photography, my number 1 read. I'll go back to the history. Dean Worcester, Fantasy Islands, by Mark Rice. Sobrang handa kayong tumaas ang dugo. It's fantastic book. It's about how Dean Worcester, one of the quote-unquote people who legitimized photography in the country, used it to colonize. So, yun. Ano pa ba yung mga ibang books na specific on Philippine writing? Ray Albano, Everything He's Ever Written. Then there is also by Doc Patrick Flores. And then parang it's part of is it a journal? Parang Why Southeast Asian Photography. So him and other curators representing their respective countries wrote Why Southeast Asian Photography. So maganda yun kasi it could parang sina Wu Jiabao, sina Taro Amano, and few others parang ganito how they view it in their own respective countries, and then you could see ganitong tingin sa Pilipinas. Yan. So many, again, like Wubin said, it's a matter of where you jump, like just gathering all those writings, you could have enough material. It's a matter of searching for it. Again, community-wise, sharing resources. Nabanggit ko na kanina, Nicole Soriano, great. But books talaga, there was a proposal in Lyceum to do books, Trans-Asia Photo Review. Yes. It's tawag dito. Yeah, well, Bubins, of course. Pero there was proposal before. Pero the process of jump-starting the book in itself, just the budget alone, because it's probably gonna take years. So because it's probably not even PhD level. It's 5-10 years kasi it's so extensive. Like, sabi ko nga, it's what how do you start? Where do you begin? How do you the process of a book? So something specific, it's much better. I remember speaking to curator in SF MoMA. She was also asking for books on Philippine photography. Like, there is none, but what I could show you is work. So it starts from there. Hopefully we can, funding is and then, and as Julius pointed out, yeah, I think Benil can pull it off. Tony, I think Sir J can do a book on Proto-Martyr.
Yeah, may ano siya. Nire-revise niya daw tapos
Yeah.
Meron siyang so basically parang I think it's not going to be a book. Parang at least parang
Catalog.
present siya for a conference, I think.
Yeah, kasi kaya di ba? There's already numerous exhibitions. There was one that was shown in CSB specifically, yung Proto-Educator. Proto-Martyr, Proto-Educator. That was great. Nice glimpse of his work. But it really is it really has to be compiled lang talaga.
At saka
I think people know, may material na. Kaya nyo na yan. Hindi na kayo ng funding.
I think yun din kasi siguro for the audiences. You have to when you say book, there are a lot in the domain of knowledge and book publishing. Merong different areas kasi, 'di ba? So I think currently Steph would know a lot of monographs in catalogs as exhibition material. So may analysis, merong articulation of the ideas, expressions, yung mga ganung bagay. So that's one part, and I think baka siguro si Steph might mention na the galleries who have the books, or at least you can visit siguro yung mga galleries na yan. And then there's books or text regarding analysis. So the analysis yun yung medyo kulang, I think. So yung kadalasan the analytic part of photography, not data technical part, the analytic part na history, critical analysis, gender, yung mga ganon, that's very limited, and usually they take a form of a journal, an academic journal. So yun I'm trying to, we're trying to put that out there. When I write sa Photography Chismis, you will find the links on the footnotes of all articles. Kahit na sobrang babaw nung sinulat ko, you will find in the footnotes the more credible source where I got the idea of the article. So when you go to Photography Chismis, may mga post ako na medyo minsan parang mababaw. Pero when you go to the footnote, you will see some sources doon of yung Trans-Pacific gaze, yung mga ganyang terminology or semantics. And then there's the power of images in terms of iconography, mga ganon. And history building and world building, nandun din yun. So siguro don't read my article, read the footnotes. Meron doon kasi I use that also in my classes. And then yung analytic part yan. So I think the academia are working on it. And I think meron naman, ang hirap lang hanapin. Kasi kadalasan it's in the library and someone doesn't share it publicly. And that's why we're trying to have it in podcast form. So we invite someone who's knowledgeable. Then they talk about it kasi some of us are tamad magbasa. Pero I encourage everyone to read it. So sinasabi nga ni AJ, no one reads. Pero that's why I decided to have a podcast. And then there's also the historical text. The historical text is very limited. So you have Guardiola, Juan Guardiola, trinace niya yung history of photography from 1841 to post-war, if I'm not mistaken, up to post-war. So nakasulat, may examples, may analysis. So that's a book. It's written in Spanish, pero you can find a translation online. So The Colonial Imaginary, yun yung title ng book. It's a book and it's also a monograph. So, and then you have yung kay Wubin, kung gusto mo ng contemporary. There's also a French guy who's writing now sa Singapore. He visited the Philippines parang something to do with Itier. Yung the history of the use of photography. Kasi diba 1838 na 1838 na gawa yung daguerreotype. 1841 supposed to be nasa Philippines na siya. That person who brought photography in the Philippines, most of the writers or the historians, they put the name kay Jules Itier. So he's a Frenchman na part of a customs mission in the Philippines. He's French. But yun, ang inikot niya kasi Singapore, Philippines, and Macau. Tapos nagkaroon pa siya ng second ano. So Massot, he's a teacher in Lasal sa Singapore. So we contacted also, baka I can invite him to the podcast also. So ano talaga. So at least anyway, my point is read the footnotes. So if AG writes, if I write, look at the footnotes kasi you can also go to the primary source. So siguro Steph, yung mga galleries na pwedeng bisitahin na may archives, I guess, of exhibitions.
Yes.
Would you want to give siguro yung mga recommended mong galleries like or Silver Lens?
Silver, or yes, Art Informal has almost all, most space. Most space has some exhibition notes, photography. Actually, I only work with maybe 10 galleries, so I'm unaware of. There are hundreds of galleries, but of course it's impossible for me. I'm barely surviving. I work on 2 shows a month. And it's like barely alive, because we need more curators and writers. I think we're super swamped. But they all have exhibition notes.
May project kami ni Steph. So in Photography Chismis, Steph might be a contributor. So at least for Anyare, there's a section in Photography Chismis that announces or at least informs the public na there's an exhibit of this na photographic in nature or parang photography based at least. And then at least people would have knowledge na parang now you have something in Silver Lens, you have something with Reina, you have something with Corinne, yung mga ganun. So Steph will be a contributor sort of sa Photography Chismis as well. So that's acknowledging her work as a curator at saka, diba? So
It's called Anyare, right?
Anyari. Yun yung parang what's up, parang gano'n, ano nangyayari. And then another question siguro okay, wala na. So Sir Julius, thanks for Dean Worcester. Is this Jack Cree? Is this a Mr. or Miss Jack Cree? Your journal po ay Translation Pacific alighting. So yun. So ayun. So sabihin mo na lang kung Miss or Mr. So any other questions? Or siguro moving from this, would you have recommendations on another topic siguro before we close? Yung next week, I would like to invite everyone then for the next naman. Yung next week would be AI. So we're going to try to discuss it also in a productive manner, na in the sense na we might not discuss it as is AI art. Kasi yun, something to do, that's going to be argumentative, that's going to be debatable, walang ending yan. So we'll try to find a way to frame it na, so what's in it for photographers and artists and practitioners and the general public with the resurgence or not resurgence, yung pagsibol ng AI art. Kasi in a way, it's not necessary that bad because there's a lot of fields who actually like it. It's just the photographic community who hates it. And the art community who hates it. Pero when you go to architects, you go to product designers, when you go to academicians, they actually like it. I mean, yung kay Corinne, di ba? She's using now AI art for a Sayano type project. So
yeah, most of the presenters of the Singapore Biennale and Singapore Art Week, maybe more than 15 of them was AI art. So to my shock, because I've been attending that, maybe I've attended 4 different years, and then the year before it was full of video, but this year, strikingly, it was many was AI art.
So yun. So next week, if you want to join that, for those who are seeing this live, and also for those who will see this on the recorded format. So next week we'll discuss AI art. We'll try to be more productive in the sense that, you know, Jake is a photographer, but he's also doing generative art. So and then the side of sila Angela and Jerry who mix art objects, meaning physical art objects, through photography, either through the archive or new work, pero there's something physical. And how does that contrast to the production of images generatively, in the sense that AI art is synthetically generated images? So we'll discuss that also. Any questions? And then tapos nga, siguro to give you an idea, in the future we have something to do with visual literacy. So we'll have Jess. In the future we'll have philosophy of photography. We'll also have photography and pornography. So medyo interesting, diba? And then photography and democracy. So we'll have that also, discussions of how does photography support or negate or question the idea of democracy in the Philippines. So kahit na ang pangalan nito is kwentuhan sessions, it's actually a bit pedagogical in the sense na where inuungkat natin yung mga topics na hindi na di-discuss in public, diba? So for example, camera clubs as sites of legitimization. So we'll invite someone from Camera Club of the Philippines and FPPF. Let's hear their idea na what is really what you're doing legitimizes photography as art in the Philippines, or you're just propagating the salon. I mean, not just, you're propagating a certain type of photography, which is the salon tradition of photography. And it's not necessarily bad. I mean, like Bubin mentioned, the salon photography as a tradition is not necessarily bad. It's just something that people tend to trivialize, and also contemporary photographers, they say na, yan na naman, wala na bang bago, diba? I mean, the power of the camera clubs as a legitimization agent. So any questions? Sige, kung wala na, so closing na lang siguro, Steph, regarding the topic, and also siguro some plugs, I don't know. So, and then AG. Photo-moto sa February. I don't know.
So plugs.
ArtFair.
Oh my. Yeah, okay. So Photomoto is going to travel to Baguio and will be opening on February 4 at the Bandcamp Museum in Benguet. There's actually, well, I hope we meet them. There's a wet plate collodion club in Baguio. I have not met them, but that will be interesting. Yeah, Art Fair Philippines, Photomoto has a booth, but also Tom Epperson, and then Niloshima and Reina Abelia. Jess Aznar has a booth, and then the trio of VJ Villafranca, Jason Kibilan, and Edric Chen have a booth called Triangulum. So there's going to be a lot of photography presence in Art Fair Philippines. Hope maybe you could go. And
that's February 17.
I don't have it with me now. I don't have it with me now, but yeah, it's mid-February.
Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully there will eventually be also a discussion of vernacular photography as being included in the history of photography, because there are lots of museums now that are featuring vernacular photography, and a lot of artists who use vernacular photography as part of installations or just part of their work.
AG?
I mean, well, thanks for having us in your pilot chismis. This is not chismisan. What's the term for this segment of yours?
Podcast ba?
For this podcast, di ba? Talking
Kwentuhan.
chismis later thing.
The Marites series.
Marites series. No, I mean, Tony, thanks for all the effort, of course, as usual. Tawag dito. As a closing thought to the topic, it came off the parang, I think it comes across the suplado ko naman sa national artist. Yeah, I actually think they did it. They were doing well for the for 30 years that it was going. It was going well. It was in 2011 that like what happened that opened like so many questions about the award. Because when you look at the winners of the award, parang legit naman. Kasi nga, it was a magisterial, it was a magisterial award. As much as I have so many criticisms about it, it stems from the fact from how can we have an award recognizing photography when you have photographers who are starving? So what's the point of this award? It's a recognition, political, so many factors, so many conversations can be. And at its core, at its end, as if you as a practitioner just looking for legitimacy, why not get it? Or why not, kumbaga, why not get the help of your community na sama-sama, parang komunista pa nga. Sama-sama tayo lahat as a community that, could work towards each other. Like, I'm not involved whatsoever with photomoto. Gulat ako, totoo para sa kanila. Ayos naman, salamat. Yung mga ganong bagay. Or portfolio review, or may ganito, may tambay. It's more of I just good work would float. Even if you're not involved in Photoland, like somebody like Tony, myself, or Steph sees somebody does good work. Nakita mo na to? Kaya mo ba? Hindi eh. Invite nga natin, or nakausap mo na. Ay, naku, ang dami naming ganun ni VJ. It's out of nowhere. Itong sa Cebuano na street photographer, nakita mo to, VJ? Hindi eh, okay yan ah. Yung mga ganung bagay. It always floats at the top. So it's just work. It's just showing up. And to me, that it starts from there. Whether we can get a national artist in the future, great. Not, okay lang din. As long as we have each other. And we have our cameras. Camera ko dyan sa likod. Itong mga to. So yeah, I mean, salamat sa pakipag-chismis. Sana may natutunan kayo or may nakuha man kayo, hindi sayang ngayong Sabadong gabi.
Hindi. This is not the last time you'll see AG and Stefan. So,
ay, di ba? Sorry, nakala ko ulit.
I-invite ko din sila ulit. Kasi may maraming topics. I think yung pagdating naman kanila Angel Shaw, din, si Dr. Patrick. So I'm also inviting Dr. Patrick for a different episode. So ang pag-uusapan naman doon is photography's response to the contemporary. I think di natin masyado diniscuss kasi ngayon yun na parang I mean, in the first place, parang even this discussion of national artists, before, the framework was historical contributions. Ngayon, siguro, baka it might be good na the person who we nominate for this could be framed on how he or she responded to the concerns of the Philippine contemporary. I mean, contemporary Philippines, diba? So yun yung sila Dr. Patrick, sila Angel, din, and may isa pa nakalimutan. Ay, Steph, kasama si Steph
Boots.
So yun
Boots. Yeah. Great. Anyway, sorry. Sa Ateneo Art Gallery. Anyway, yeah, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
So yun, so guys, salamat sa pag-join. So hopefully kahit pa paano, kahit na medyo kalat pa ako ng konti since it's episode 1. So salamat sa pag-join. So again, next week we have the episode 2, which is AI imaging and challenging the index. So that's going to be interesting. We have Jeric Garcia, who's a professor in Binilde and also is an artist. Angela Silva is an artist who works with cyanotypes and archival work, meaning she gets images from her personal archives and does art with it. We have Jilson Q, so someone na medyo younger in the sense na a lot of younger photographers see him as parang a hero. So street photography, documentary photography, and we have Jake Versosa. He's a photojournalist and photo documentary. He also does art, but he also does AI art. So interesting yung idea na someone who photographs is also open to AI art, wherein most people would would be parang adversarial when it comes to AI art. So Jake is an interesting scenario, parang case. And then we have Joseph Desmond Cruel. He's a filmmaker. He's from ABS-CBN and he does AI art as well. So siya yung parang siya yung sa affirmative side. So hindi siya debate next week. It's just an open discussion similar to what we had today. So with that, so thank you everyone. So hopefully I can also join next week. So we'll be uploading the video to Photography Chismis for those who missed it. So yun, so magandang gabi, salamat sa lahat. Bye-bye. Siguro stay na lang tayo each at saka Steph. Thank you everyone. Guys, thank you. Sobrang thank you for joining. So, ayun pala, AJ, hindi ko pala na-mention bakit wala si Sandra. Sandra, hindi lang nakaka-record pa ako. Wait, stop ko muna. So, stop recording.